So Gretchel Hathaway, that's my name. And how many F&M folks are in this room who graduated? All right, all right. And so did my son, which is one of the reasons why I wound up at F&M. He was here from 2003 to 2007. I have been doing this work for quite some time and quite enjoy it. Thank you. I'm going to have each of them just kind of say a little bit about themselves so you get to know us a little bit better.
Hi again. My name's Louise. I am a librarian at Franklin and Marshall College, but I also work in the archives and special collections. So I help manage access to all of our historical research. And I mean, a great part about working at FNM is being able to be on committees like this, and just grateful to be with these folks here.
Hi, my name is Shianne Hargrove. I am the Research and Communication Service Assistant here at Lancaster History. I'm also on the board of the African American Historical Society of South Central Pennsylvania. I work at Lancaster History as a information specialist in the research center, but I also do social media and marketing for the organization. And I am also an archivist and social media person for the African American Historical Society. And I was brought on here to help these two basically be a community connection and involve both of those institutions into their research.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the research, a little bit about the direction we're going in, a little bit about why we brought Shianne into this realm with us as a partner from the city, and we'll end with Q&A. We're good? Come on, F&M folks, y'all say it louder. You good? All right, let's get to the next slide. I will let you know we are confined to this space so that the camera can see us, but also I always stand to this side of the podium because y'all can't see me. We start with the project goals. So this article came out by Paul Finkelman, and thank goodness that he did, because it got us to really thinking about our two namesakes, folks, Franklin and Marshall. So the college, I decided to take this on. We decided, along with our board, let's dig into the history. Let's look at this work and not focus on whether or not we should change names and things like that. People question all of that when it comes to colleges. That's a board decision, right? But let's start a study group and pull together a study group. Well, we put the information out there to everyone on the campus. Louise jumped on right at the start. We worked with Louise Stevenson. Is she here? No? Okay. Professor Louise Stevenson was part of the committee and part of the chair. Now she's emeriti and enjoying life at the beach somewhere. And we decided and let the board know what the mission and the vision of the study group, which was to study and produce research. That's basically what we were doing. We were not going to talk about name change, but we might talk about finances and funds we might need to help educate the community about our two namesakes. And I call them namesakes because they weren't the founders of the college, F&M, the college. So we call them namesake. And we decided to develop a plan that incorporated not just us, but the rest of the Lancaster community. Long-term investments we thought about. We need financial investment to expand this educational component of making sure that students who come on campus, even visitors who come on our campus, know a little bit about our history. We have students who are doing independent studies on this work. So the document, which you can get on the QR code, is now public, but it's a living document. Meaning that as we get more information from students, research and independent studies, we have a student who's trying to pull together a legacy walk around the campus, talking about the histories of certain buildings on the campus, and we're integrating this work into the curriculum. And we intentionally decided to partner with the African American Historical Society of South Central Pennsylvania and Lancaster History because we were asked by Yale University to actually come up there for them to learn a little bit about what we're doing, but also for us to learn from the legacy of slavery group out of the, what's CIC stand for? Colleges of Independent, Council of Independent Colleges who are also doing this work. So those colleges now have a consortium, and we immediately jumped on the consortium. That's our two friends. My son, when he heard about the research we were doing, he said, well, can we call it Aretha Franklin Thurgood Marshall College? But you know, children come up to those statues. There's a lot of actually pretty cool wording around the statues that is really about their quotes, which I thought was pretty clever. And then right after that article came out, someone vandalized Marshall. So we covered both figures, and it took probably 2 to 3 days for them to clean it off and re-preserve that. So that happened in June 2021. And then people heard about the study that we were about to put on. So here are the major findings.
Speak into this. Hello. So as Gretchel just kind of set up, that event with the article being produced by Paul Finkelman, which criticized John Marshall and his connection to slavery, as well as some vandalism on campus to the two statues, really created some discussion. So I wanted to talk about the major findings of our Legacy of Slavery report, which was put out to the community in 2022. So we had about 20 or so, maybe 25 faculty, professional staff, and students working on our study group together to start to dive into this history. Again, all of this was volunteer. You know, no one is being paid to do this extra work. We kind of just felt that this was an important project to take on, and this was a really huge starting point. So we knew we wanted to get this report out. The main areas that we looked into for this study was, one, to look into the histories of both John Marshall and Benjamin Franklin and their lives. And again, we do consider them just namesakes because neither of those gentlemen really had a direct connection or stood on campus at Franklin and Marshall. Franklin donated 200 pounds as an original subscriber to Franklin College. So that's kind of where his name comes from and the direct connection there. But other than that, that's all they really are these figureheads. So two groups looked into the lives of both of those men, and we do know them as enslavers and their relationship to slavery throughout their lives. I'm not going to go too deeply into it because it's very complex, and I encourage you all to maybe after this talk either take a look at our report, but also we have put together some timelines on these banners. They're both in the back right now about John Marshall and Benjamin Franklin and their relationships to slavery. The second area we looked into was literally a group of figures who do have direct connections to the founding of Franklin College. So we compiled a list of about, how many names? 50 names, 59 names, and that included founders, trustees, and original subscribers, so folks who gave money and invested into the founding of Franklin College in 1787. We then took that group of names and cross-referenced them with just a few historical records, so specifically the first United States Census, and tax records. And we found of those names, about 20 of them had a connection, and it was evident that they did have slaves and were connected to enslavement in that way. So that was a really big find for us. Another area looked into just the history of slavery in Pennsylvania to kind of set the scene for where Franklin College was coming out of, what the environment and society was like during that time period. And then the last section of the report looks into what other colleges are doing. As Mabel mentioned in the beginning, this is something that institutions across the country are kind of involved in right now. And we wanted to compare our project with what other folks are doing and compare our histories, because everyone has a unique story to tell. Thinking forward, just to leave it there, there's so much more that we can do with the history. We can take this list of 20 people and look into their lives, look at their papers, think about the conversations they were having around enslavement. You know, what were their families like? What was their property like? And also, we just looked at Franklin College. There are so many interesting figures deeply connected to Lancaster County from Marshall College, like Frederick Rauch, and we have Nevin. So all of these names that are recognizable and that we just didn't really get to in this first stage of project. And this is just an image of these banners that we see around us. So once we published the report, it's about 50 pages. We knew if we sent this in an email to campus, no one's opening that email. It is freely available online, but we wanted to get this information out in a more digestible way. So we held an open house in April of 2023 with our banners and allowed members of our community of FNM to come read the findings, talk to us, ask questions, and make suggestions for where we can take this research further. Since then, we've had these banners in various places on campus. We've had them at commencement, homecoming events, to get them exposed to more communities, alumni, families, prospective students. So people are kind of aware of the research that our faculty, staff, and students are doing. And these are available to anyone. So if you have, you know, an institution that you'd like to put these up in the community, let us know and you can borrow. Okay, so Gretchel mentioned this. So once we had our report done, we heard about the CIC Legacies of American Slavery group, which connects independent colleges from around the US and allows them to share their research about their connection to American slavery at their institutions. So we applied for this Public History Institute last year. We spent a lovely week there. But the great part about it was that it allowed us to connect with Shianne. This institute was fantastic because it brings together colleges, so folks working at universities doing this kind of work, but then implores them to connect with the community and make sure that there's a partner with the community. So that's how we met Shianne. So the three of us went to Yale for a week and presented our project to about 8 other groups, learned from them, inspired by them, and also allowed us to reflect on like what we can do better. How can we better get this information to community members, to the people of Lancaster, and got a lot of great feedback. And more importantly, I think it allowed us to have some training, especially related to our next project of oral histories, which I will talk about in a bit.
So one of the places we visited on purpose, by the way, was a visit to Davidson College. So I actually had a conference at Davidson College and decided to also dig into their history because Hillary Tan, Dr. Hillary Tan, Hillary Green. Hillary Tan is that famous author, see? I was almost there. Hillary Green graduated from FNM College, and her parents graduated from FNM College. And she does this research, and she is now a professor at Davidson College. She came to our campus. She was one of our Common Hour speakers. She came to the campus and shared we sent her the report, and then she shared her thoughts about the report and then said something very specific. She thought the report was very strong, very deep, but now we need to skip the Jim Crow era and catch the alums from the civil rights era because they are alive, which includes her parents. Smart move, and we started that, and one of the people we went to interview actually had passed away between the time I saw him and the time we were ready to do the video. But she talks about, I mean, this is her work, this is her scholarship. The Davidson College, another small, even smaller than F&M, because I went down there, liberal arts college. And what you will see in the that imprint there, Davidson College was built by folks who had been enslaved by Davidson College. So that imprint is the thumbprint of a person who was enslaved who, when they made the brick, that's their thumbprint. And there are bricks all around with thumbprints in them at Davidson College. The three main buildings have that in each of the buildings. You can see that in the three main buildings that were built in the original college. And it's still a college. They teach in the same buildings. It's amazing how they keep it open because they are very old buildings, but they have really done a good job making them accessible for folks. And they actually have classrooms in there. So I was impressed by that. A little bit more impressed by this. So what Davidson do, they're really doing a good job of reckoning what the college did and who they had on campus. They're having an artist, Hank Willis Thomas, build this statue. So you see the hands. This is just a rendition. Those are, fake people. But it's going to be in the middle of the campus. So the building in the back, the building that's to the right, and the building that's to the left are the buildings that enslaved folks built. And this is what they're going to, and it's called With These Hands, A Memorial to the Enslaved, courtesy of the Archives and Special Collection of Davidson College. So they had to go deeper because a lot of what you see on that campus, including what used to be the laundry room, which is now named after the laundress whose parents were enslaved at Davidson College. They also have actually a very beautiful cemetery, absolutely beautiful, because they keep up this cemetery. But now people in the community connected to the college can also be buried there. But it was a cemetery only for the enslaved folks. So it was very interesting to me because my heart felt for the fact that they actually did have a cemetery for these folks. But my heart wept at the fact that you could see the thumbprints. And many of us who touched it, you could see the emotions in them as they touch. I'm getting a little emotional now. As you touch the hand that built the college, who were enslaved and forced to build that college. And yet, not be able to learn there.
So, as Louise had mentioned, CIC, the Legacies of Slavery program, was looking for a community connection. And that's where I come in. And I was asked to be a representative for the African American Historical Society of South Central Pennsylvania. Now, can I get a hands of those who know anything about the Historical Society, the African American Historical Society? Okay. And I can't see the folks online, so I'm just going to assume there's some hands that are raised. So I'm going to talk about what the African American Historical Society and what Lancaster History, what these two institutions can bring and have brought to F&M and the report and what they are doing right now. So I'm going to give a little backstory for those who aren't familiar with the African American Historical Society. So we were established in 2005. We are an affiliate of Christmas Addicts Center in Lancaster. And what we do is collect, analyze, and interpret the history of African Americans in Lancaster County and surrounding counties in the southern end of Pennsylvania. And so we do a lot of things. We do events, we do workshops. We also do walking tours. And so this is where F&M comes in, and this is where the students of F&M can come in. And so with these walking tours, they can learn about the history and heritage of the African American community here in Lancaster, and it is a rich and long one. You know, there's historical churches, there's cemeteries, there's businesses, and there's a strong connection to the Underground Railroad as well. And so this is where they can learn about that history and the impact that it has had on the community and the free Black community here in Lancaster. And we can talk about the Underground Railroad, and we can talk about those free communities and how they provided, support and shelter to those who were seeking freedom. Mason-Dixon line is right there. A lot of those who were enslaved were seeking freedom from Maryland and coming into Pennsylvania. And there were a lot of, especially in the southern ends of Lancaster, Black communities who were helping to shelter those people. And so that history is important, and you can't remove it from Lancaster, and it's also connected to Franklin and Marshall as well. And there's another walking tour that is also important, and it's the Southeast walking tour, and that is specifically about 19th century and 20th century African American life. And so that's looking at urban renewal, especially in neighborhoods like the 7th Ward, especially dealing with civil rights movement at that time as well, and how that impacted the lives of African Americans. And so these two tours are important to learning about the history of African Americans and about the history of, the student life, African American student life at Franklin and Marshall. And so what we want the students to do is come in and possibly become tour guides. And we call them conductors. And we, would love them to, come in and help facilitate and even, have some more research, do some more research and provide, some answers that we might not have. And those resources that we have at the African American Historical Society can also blossom in as well with the research. And so with Lancaster history as well, there is a lot of great resources that we have provided for F&M. And so we have the African American, we have the African American Records Collection here. And that is a great resource for those who are seeking to expand their knowledge of African American history here at Lancaster County. And as well, and that collection specifically deals with spanning from 1780 to 1980. And so I'm gonna give some context to 1780. So that is the same year that the Gradual Abolition Act was passed. So giving some context to that history is right there. And then as well, Franklin and Marshall were still living at this time, Franklin was a president of the PA Abolish Society. He was still, in the community, and he was still trying to, save his identity and change the mindset of those because he was a slave owner. And he wanted, towards the end of his life, to be remembered as someone who advocated for the end of slavery. And so students can look into that information, and they can look into things like manumissions that we have in that record collection. They can look at Negro Entry Book, which is also considered one of the most historical records of African American life here in Lancaster. And they can look at those stories, and they can connect the dots and see how those two can intertwine, and that resources can be connected, and we can help students understand the African American life here. And so another thing that would be important to look at is the history of the law and justice system here. So Thieves and Vagabonds exhibit, which is right out there, I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already been through that and have seen what resources we have. And it is dealing with the Abolition Act, things like the Civil Rights Movement as well, and history on Thaddeus Stevens and James Buchanan. And so all of these things combined, and students can utilize these resources here. And again, these institutions have those resources for them. And so another institution that we can come together and build upon is the Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center, which is opening soon in 2025. And that will be an additional institution that we can connect with this research. And it's basically centered around the lives of Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith and the history of, the legacies of Thaddeus Stevens as a congressman and the work that he was doing. So it was highlighting the 13th Amendment, the abolition of slavery, the 14th Amendment, the right to citizenship, and the 15th Amendment, that gives men all the right to vote. And so all of these elements are connected to what we're doing here for the report and for what we're expanding on for their research. And all of these elements we can utilize and help students to, they can come to the center, they can learn more, we can, also use research here at Lancaster, and we can also use the workshop rooms that we have hopefully at the center. And again, all of these institutions can become sort of a connected piece of a puzzle. And that's pretty much what we're trying to do here.
Thank you, Shianne. And that was great. And it's great to emphasize that that's really what we want to do, is emphasize how many amazing resources there are just in Lancaster City. If we think about the Legacy of Slavery report, I'll be honest, we didn't use the college archives at F&M much at all. Because, I mean, there's a whole conversation to be had at who keeps the history, right? And we're not telling the history of African Americans if not many African Americans were at F&M, frankly. What we did use were some of our original list of trustees, lists of people, we can get people's names, but we're not getting the types of resources that you get at our city institutions that do collect that local history. So just to bring it back to F&M a little bit and a quick recap. So we did the report. We could use a refresher of the report, honestly. We made these banners and we continue to use them on campus. We've brought them out for various events. We've also had panel discussions with the Board of Trustees, so they stay in the loop with the work that we continue to do. We also, when was that? Last year, last fall? We connected with the group at Ursinus College. We met them at Yale at the Public History Institute, and they're doing incredible work for their project looking at incarceration in their town as the legacy of slavery. So they invited us to go talk at their institution, and we met their students and faculty and had a great discussion there. We also have had Common Hour talks, if anyone's been to Common Hour at F&M with Hillary Green. And that kind of brings us to our current project. As Gretchel mentioned, Hillary does this work at Davidson College investigating college histories and connections to enslavement, and suggested we do an oral history project. So that leads us to a project we started last year that we are tentatively calling Civil Rights and Social Justice at F&M. I will go hit that. I'm going to take this with me.
It should be
Okay,
on.
thank you. Okay, so as Louise heads over to start the film, and our Zoom guru over here gets the Zoom folks to see the film. I'm just watching her to make sure she got it. I do want to tell you, when you watch this clip, so we've interviewed a number of alums from the 60s. Names given to us by other people, but also they gave us more names to add to our list of people to interview for the oral history around the civil rights era. So Calvin Baker is a fantastic alum, very good talker, but you'll see him, but you'll also see the passion that he shows. Is it ready?
Yes. So this is about a 4-minute clip, and just to set some context, he had just finished talking to us about a really challenging and upsetting and racist interaction he had with a white student on campus. And then he dives into another story.
Expecting. So obviously we were all traumatized by that. And I think it made us, it certainly put us on alert, because we came down naive about, oh man, you know, we're just gonna fold in and be students and classmates and buddies. That, okay, we got a challenge in front of us. And so that was a wake-up call. And then I worked in the admissions office. That was my work assignment duty. And I noticed that there was some uneasiness in the student body with this great influx of African American students. But my attitude was, well, wait a minute, you know, y'all are just getting started. You know, we have 10 in this class. You know, y'all ought to be improving it. You know, you ought to have 20 next year. Well, the following year, we had 2 Black entering freshmen, Charlie Williams and a fellow named, I think his name is Lauren Hunt. And the following year after that, they had 2. So, you know, I'm from Brooklyn and I don't have any sense. So I started asking questions in the admissions office. Well, what's going on? I mean, I know you can't tell me there aren't qualified African-American students to come to Franklin and Marshall. And so I started getting some of the other guys to rally around this. And this must have been, I was a junior now. So this was the college president, I'm trying to think, he'd just come in, Keith Spalding. So I guess word got back to Keith that there was this colored boy from Brooklyn who was raising a little ruckus because we didn't have more African-American being admitted to Franklin Marshall College. And of course, he proceeded to get the word back to me that I was a rabble rouser and I basically need to stay in my place. So now I'm not saying that Keith had a problem with Black people, but I will say he was diversity challenged. And long story short, some folks must have made the decision, you know what, we really need to do better than this. Following year, we had 20 African-American students entering Franklin and Marshall College. Well, you know, maybe sometimes you gotta make some noise. Expecting.
1 second. Okay. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that maybe in the Q&A, because it's such a great clip. And he was, I mean, you could just tell he's a great person, and we had a really nice visit together. And, you know, sometimes he was cracking jokes. Sometimes he was, you know, very emotional, telling really difficult stories. And we've done about 9 interviews so far in the last year, both via Zoom, so online, or in person. And right now we're kind of putting a pause in this project and thinking forward. So our first step really is to finish this first phase of the oral history project. Again, we have about 9 of these very big files living in my Google Drive, but we got them backed up in the archives, so they live in Franklin and Marshall College archives, and they're available to anyone. We don't have them posted anywhere right now. We're still kind of figuring that out, but if anyone wants to access these videos and these interviews, they are free to anyone. So what we've also done is work with our Department of Communications and a really talented filmmaker who works at the college, has access to these videos and is going to produce them in a really nicely packaged documentary series of films. And again, something that we can share with the community in a way that's easily digestible and also kind of contextualizes their stories in Lancaster. We want to bring in this context of when and where these students were when they were students at FNM in the 60s and 70s. Some even are from Lancaster. So we have some really interesting stories there. Because we have these collections, we'll continue to work with Lancaster History and the African American Historical Society so that they can reference these collections and we can share resources in that way. And then finally, we're also thinking about ways to enhance our statuary on campus. This has been something we've talked about from the beginning. These two statues stand right on the main green outside of Old Main, and we're thinking of ways that we can better contextualize these men. Can we add another piece of artwork to complement them? Can we add signage or historical markers to allow visitors to think about our history differently and think about these men differently and reflect a little bit on our history at this campus?
And I just want to add, so I know some campuses melted their statues, moved their statues. I don't know what else they did with it, broke up their statues. I'm an artist, so to me, this is also art. I don't believe in that. And I also don't believe in hiding history. So we have these two gentlemen. They sit right in front of my window. I see them every day. I say good morning. But I think that once we think about what that signage would be, we need to put in that signage information on the fact that they were enslaved and then what we did about that, and maybe add the little QR code on there so that if you're just a visitor walking through or you're a prospective student or you want to be employed on campus, you would at least know that history. My son did not know the history before he was admitted. And I question to this day whether he would have gone if he had known that history, right? But I love the fact that he was comical about the name change. Didn't know what to expect out. I don't know, alum of FNM. What's next? Continue to partner with local institutions and other projects learning our history of slavery. Sponsor FNM students to conduct the research with Lancaster History and the African American Historical Society. Support both agencies. Partner with this new Thaddeus Stevens and Lydia Hamilton Smith Center. I've been in there probably 4 times. I was there when there was like dirt and dust, and I honestly really wanted one of those white helmets because I was scared. We're gonna go right through that floor. And now we are collaborating with Reckoning with Lancaster. So when I arrived on the campus, Professor Mary Ann Levine, right? Okay, Mary Ann Levine. I have a friend named Mary Ann Levine, so I always have to think, what is her name again? That was when she had already done all the work to do our land acknowledgement. Well, now the campus has this huge 4-year grant, Mellon grant, named Reckoning with Lancaster. So this year they're doing work on Native American culture on the campus, but also within our community. So I've met with them a couple of times, the team of faculty and Native American folks, and I think there's a couple of folks from the city was in the room. But next year, the focus is on our city's African American history. So I can't wait to work with them on that. And I forget what the other 2 years out that they're working on. But really doing more collaboration with them and sharing and making sure they understand the materials we already have at the college. And then including the historic rock forward plantations. So I was there once educating one of the staff members who does a tour. We became friends, but she does a tour and she wanted to make sure she was using the right language. So if you notice, we didn't say slave folks, we said enslavers, right? You say enslavers. You can also say they own slaves, but that is not correct, right? Because as human beings, they should not be owned, right? These folks were enslavers, so don't put the onus on the people. They didn't take on that name, they were given that name. So helped her walking through her talk. I would not have known about Rockford at all until she tapped me on the shoulder one day and said, hey, can you help me here? So even thinking about what is it that they do, what is it that they teach, and what is it they could be doing better. So that's really what we're looking at, what's next. And now it's time for questions, folks. So thank you. I also want to thank these two young people. When we arrived at Yale, have you ever taken the train to Yale? I'm telling you, it's like going to Timbuktu. But we land, and I'm significantly older, but I would say more mature than these young ladies, though I don't act that way. And they said, oh, we can walk. It was all uphill with suitcases. And they are ahead of me, and I just keep going. I can still see you somewhere out there. Then we get there, and you had to walk from the hotel. That's the one thing no one liked, because we had a couple of very much older folks, but also folks who had accessibility issues. From the hotel to the campus, it's the continuing of the hill. But we had a great time. We bonded. I just want to thank these two for joining me on this journey of doing this research, because the fact that we have young folks who are interested in it, to me, is quite impressive. So let's thank those two folks. I love you, girls. Questions?
All right,
you have to use the mic,
yes,
because we're on Zoom.
If folks have questions, I will walk over to you and hand you the mic to ask it.
Thank you. My name is Pete. I work at Susquehanna National Heritage Area, the two-county heritage area from York and Lancaster County. I'm curious because I know that there are Southern connections to Franklin and Marshall, that there were students that came from Southern states. You probably would have mentioned this, but did you ever find donations coming in from Southern benefactors, and then maybe cross-reference that with sales of enslaved persons?
That's a great thought. And we do know that, yes, there were students at F&M who came from wealthy families in the South. And so, you know, the clear connection there to slavery, it's there. That is a really good thought. And we haven't dived into too much of the archival work in that way. We'd love to get like a student involved to take on some of that. Because, yeah, early records of F&M. So Franklin College kind of existed for like a year. And the records from that time period are pretty sparse, honestly. So a full banking and treasurer's record is a little sparse, but thank you. No, that is a really good area to look into.
Hi. My question is about the 20 founders, trustees, et cetera, who owned slaves. that were associated with the university. I'm very interested in their identities. What were their positions in the college and so forth? What can you tell
So
us about
just
that?
like, so they were enslavers, and just like any college, they were kind of almost like the board of trustees, I would say. Some are on the board of the college. So we're still digging into that, but some of the names that are up there are on the original board of Franklin and Marshall College.
Yeah, that list of names is available in the report. It's not hard to find. I mean, some of them are Jasper Yates.
Jasper Yates is one of the on the board of trustees, and we have a lot of records about him here at Lancaster. We also have a library named after him, and we have all of his law books. So there is that connection. So if anyone is interested, the Library and Research Center is available, and you can look into him more and maybe find out more about the board of trustees.
Other questions?
There's a group that meets every Thursday morning in the fall called Quest. And this morning, Frank Bremer, who was a professor at Millersville, retired, gave a really good talk on statuary and removing it and preserving it, and what you said about, is it art, is it history? But it was videoed. So tomorrow it'll be up on the Quest site. So you might want to look at it because it was really very informative.
Thank you. I think I'd love to look at that. There was a hand up here too. Thank you for letting us know about that. We'll take a look at that tomorrow.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It is sorely needed. I have a couple of questions, and I could go on and on. I've taught at F&M, and I taught, very interestingly, 5 Black students, males, who were residents of Philadelphia, who were brought to F&M to be eventual freshmen. And I was the professor brought in from outside to teach these 5 how to write. So if you want some oral history, I can give you.
Oh, yeah. I love that history.
Because it gets naughty, not because of my relationship to them, but to their attempts to adjust to this culture. Some doing it very well, one not doing it well at all. Are there courses now at F&M centered on your research and its results?
So there are, people are using the data or the information from that research in their work. And you could probably talk more about that.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. There's been talk about maybe doing a freshman intro class as a topics course. The one class we have partnered with is an American Studies class, intro level, and their last assignment for the past 2 years, it's been so fun. She hands the report to the students, and they do a role-playing activity. And so she divides the class up into different populations of the student body or the campus. So there are about 5 students acting as the board of trustees. There's a group of students as radical alumni. There's a group of students as conservative alumni. There's a group of students acting as conservative students, moderates. So kind of taking on these roles, and then the last day, they play out kind of in front of a group of judges, and we've judged them and they make suggestions as to what the college should do in the future. So it's been a really fun and engaging way to talk about a topic that is so important and heavy, but in a way that takes down those barriers and allows students to think about the place that they're at and what role they can play in making change at the college. So I think it's getting used in kind of assignment-based things, which is exciting. Yeah.
I have one other question, and I'll give this away. Are you able to say how many Black students or non-white students are currently enrolled?
I can give you an estimate of the incoming class. And we group them as students, domestic students of color. So the last one I looked at was 9%. So we have about 470 students coming into class. But no, students of color, so 9%. So these are Hispanic, Blacks, who else is included in that? Asian, so, but they're American domestic. 9% of the college, so the total would be 500, it was about 470 this year, 475 maybe students. My numbers can be off because of the new rule by affirmative action where they took it away. So we cannot even ask that question prior to students coming. And getting students to tell us after they've been accepted is even harder.
I'll just add that F&M also has a really huge international population. It's about a third of the student body. It comes from outside of the states. So there's a lot of diversity outside of just, domestic people of color, which brings a whole different history to the college, I think.
Yeah, but we're now we have a new admissions director, and she's working directly with us in order to teach them how to do it better for domestic students of color that are from America. So she's fantastic, Leslie Davison. If you haven't ever met her, she's also should be a comedian. She has these little sly digs that are, but I love working with her because she takes this stuff seriously and she's intentionally looking at who we're bringing in and who do we need more in order to make our campus more culturally beautiful. I saw a hand way in the back too. Okay, Mandy, and then who had their hand up way in the back? Now you're shy, I see.
I've got a kind of an observation. First, I want to applaud you for the work you've been doing. It's a great contribution to the city, to the county, to the community. I'm aware of the fact that James Buchanan, whose legacy we are charged with educating from, was the president of Franklin and Marshall College, I think at the time that the merger took place between Marshall and Franklin colleges. And we know that Buchanan was a Southern sympathizer. He was a strong defender of kind of the economic structures that undergirded the slavocracy of the South. And at the same time that Franklin and Marshall is gaining strength as an institution, these cotton mills on South Prince Street come into being, and they become these kind of major arrivals of kind of this industrial revolution here in this community. And I'm wondering whether or not there may be connections between some of the students who are coming from the South and some of the plantation owners whose cotton is finding its way to Lancaster to be worked on here. So there may be some fruitful investigations in that whole area of economy on a national scale, but then kind of drilling right down to the specifics of personalities in this community attracting people to the college.
Yeah, wow, that's very interesting. And that's the kind of data and information we need. That's why we call this a living document. So we can add that information to our living document on our campus, which is now public. We allowed the board to see it first, and then our community to see it second. And then we said, okay, now it's ready. We can let the public see it, but that we can add that to our research. I would tell you one of the things about history, and I'm not a historian, so this is Gretchel's point of view. I actually wrote a book. It's a historical fiction based on two real people. One was a president of a college, and the other was a person who had escaped slavery and wound up working at the college. And I'm not going to tell you the story, but I added the love theme to it. I had to do that because the women were powerful. Only most of the women in the book that I mentioned were seen by others and mainly written by white men as shrew. But the president's wife, she was actually a very smart businesswoman. But in that, I tell the story. The story is about the person who had been enslaved. His name was Moses. The president's name was Eliphalet Not. Say that 5 times fast. And after I wrote the book, and I wrote it for 6th graders to 12th, because I was writing it as a research paper, and it was academic, and I was getting really bored with myself. And my daughter, sitting in the back seat after I told the story, said, "Mom, why don't you write it as a chapter book for all of us? We don't have that many chapter books that have a happy ending when it's Black people." And I pull the car over because her girlfriend, one's Chinese and one's white, says, "Yeah," So I started writing it for them, and published the book. After I wrote the book, maybe 2-3 years after, a professor found out that Eliphalet Not, the president, was also the president of, what is that group that, the group who was trying to send students to Liberia, former slaves to Liberia? Say that? Thank you. Yeah, he was president of it. So I find that out after the book is written. So I'm in a classroom, in a history class with all these students because they wanted me to talk about the book. They had read the book and they questioned why I didn't put that in there. Well, first we didn't find out about it until after. And I said, but you have to understand, you might get annoyed that he was part of that, but there were actually free Black men on that colonization group. So you have to take the book, in the thoughts, in the context of what was happening then. So they thought they were doing right, and now we all know that would not have been good for anybody. But you have to take it in the context of history. And that's what I kind of live by. This happened, these 2 gentlemen were enslavers, but in actuality, most of the nation was, and they thought it was right. And it was the folks who said, this is not right, and you're taking quotes out of the Bible in mixed context, and really trying to ensure that the industry of slavery would end. But until those folks spoke up, the country was quite happy with the industry of slavery. So you have to really, and I love that class because we kind of laughed about it at the end, but they have to, and we teach our students, you have to think about what was the time and place that these things occurred. No, it was not good. And I'm telling you, even right now, we're gonna look at the history of the past 5 years. I'm just gonna maybe say 8 years. I'll go out to 12 years. And the history books will do a lot of criticizing of some of the stands that this country has been taking on major global issues.
All right.